everybody's doing now. So if you want to be relevant in any way, shape, or form, you have to have some kind of a live cast now. So that's why we're doing that. And that is the reasoning behind it. Everybody's doing now. So if you want to be relevant, okay, that's going to go away. We'll open up the Zoom meeting back up. This is being live streamed, just so everybody knows. And we will go ahead and get started. First of all, welcome everybody. I hope everybody's doing well and that you had a good weekend. I had a went on vacation, and now I am back, and of course putting out all of the fires and just all the fun things that are associated with that, and then jumping back into Zoom live meetings and all of the other stuff that goes on. Bottom line is we had a great vacation. That's what we work for. That's why we do what we do. And take some time to enjoy yourselves. No point in working so hard if we're going to just not enjoy it. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and make sure that we have the live cast started. And I'm going to go ahead and do a screen share. I'm going to do a screen share here. And then we're going to go right into Wayne's Lock Shop. Okay. If you are not a member of Wayne's Lock Shop, please do so and check it out. It's a 7-day free trial, no strings attached, no nothing. You don't have to put a credit card in or anything. Just go to wayneslockshop.com, fill out an application. It says apply now, and you should be on there. So what we're going to be going through today is, and I'll show you, this is exactly how you use the website. So hopefully everybody can see my screen now. If anybody cannot see my screen, please speak up and let me know. We're going to go into the forum section. In the forum section, we're going to have all these different categories. Today's category is going to be commercial locksmithing and high-end commercial locksmithing. So today we're going to be installing the SecureTech high security 3-point multi-point locking system. Okay. This is a very complicated system to install. So if you have not installed one before, I highly recommend that you get some education on it, and taking this class, or at least sitting through this Zoom seminar, will give you a much broader idea as to what it really takes to install these. I'll also say that this was such a big project that I thought I was going to be able to cover the internal linkage ones that we set up too, but this is the external one only. There are so many steps involved with this process that I could only show one in this hour or so that we have, or half hour, depending on how long it takes to move through all of this different material. Okay, so with that said, they make an external one that will convert a conventional door like this one was set up for regular cylindrical lever prep here, just like this. It's going to bolt directly on here. The other doors actually got shipped from SecureTech directly, and they have all of this linkage internal. Okay, so it's easier to work on the external one, and it's better to get a good idea of what's going on with it and how the process works, to understand how the internal ones work as well. I quoted this job. I told them I would charge them $2,400 a day, because how I got this job was the contractor did not know how this system worked. They were not familiar with it, and therefore they needed help setting the system up. So I told them I haven't done the internal ones yet either. I've set up some of the tridents and things like that, but I haven't set this exact system up yet. So I wanted to make sure that I bided my time on that and made sure that I didn't underbid it. So I just told them it's $2,400 a day, and until whatever it takes to get it done. So what it ended up taking is I spent about a day installing this system alone, but there are other reasons that it took so long, and I will go over those. As well, because it wasn't 100%. I'm not one to pass the buck. I always take blame and accept the responsibility for where it's due. But this was a nightmare because the manufacturer sent the wrong equipment out. We were trying to install a outswing setup on an in-swing door and had one very crucial component missing. And that one component missing ended up causing about 4 hours of delay and absolute waste of time, because the technical support person that I was talking to, I kept sending them pictures. I have this piece. It doesn't look right. No matter which way I set it, it doesn't fit properly. What is the problem? And they kept saying, you need to use the in-swing piece. The breakdown in communication happened when they refused to tell me, or at least withheld the information that they didn't send that piece. So I kept trying to install a piece that was not there. Only when I finally got fed up with it enough to where I called technical support back and said, hey, there is no way that this is working. I'm an intelligent person and I know how these systems work. This is not right. And there's nothing that's going to make this work. And they said, yeah, no kidding. We need to send you the in-swing part. That little piece of information said 4 hours ago would have saved me 4 hours of time and pain and anguish. So clear communication with your installer or your technical support is going to be very, very important on these. So let's go ahead and get started with this thing right here. And this is going to be how the project started. Blank door right here, ready for lever prep. There was a Schlage keypad on here. We took that off immediately. And this is what we were left with. So the very first thing that you get is you get these instructions here for the recommended placement on the door. It's going to give you measurements for your center line, and it's going to give you measurements for your vertical linkage here, okay? So you need to follow and base everything off of these particular measurements, okay? Once we get into it and once we get started, it's basically a mortise body with levers that extend up and down, or vertical linkage that extends up and down. Love the expanding metal wall linings, the poor man's version. Yeah, actually, this was for I'm not going to disclose the customer, but a similar customer to like Louis Vuitton, Dolce & Gabbana, very, 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 very high-end store. And all of that wire mesh is actually on the inside, it's on the outside, and it's covered up in another layer of drywall, so you do not actually see the wire mesh there. So excellent, excellent spot on that, Mark Dawson. This is a very high security room and a very high security location. Matter of fact, every single door that goes to this location is one of these multi-point high security locking systems. So great explanation and great noticing that, Mark. So here's what you're going to get. This is the very first piece. We have to start off with one piece, and this was the piece that we decided to start off with, and this is the one that all of your measurements basically get measured from. So you've got to start off here, and you've got to have your center line measurements, and then a very important measurement is this little spindle hole right here, and then your other measurement is going to come off of this. Now, depending on what lock you have, what door you have, and what specs you have, your measurements are going to be different, so you need to follow your own manufacturer's specifications according to your job here. All right. So it's a mortise body attached to a larger body, and you can see the Securitech emblem printed here, and you're going to see this large deadbolt that shoots out. So the whole point behind these and the whole point behind this system is how can we come up with a system that doesn't need a latch, because a latch is easily bypassed. Credit card, latch slipping, all of these different things defeat a common plunger sprung latch, right? Well, you would have to make it so that something else is the trigger point, and that once everything is lined up, that trigger point would then trigger and fire the devices, and everything would lock into place. We have to align first and then set the trigger device. Okay, similar to vertical linkage with an exit device. So that all happens at the top. The top runs this door, and we'll go over that shortly. That's why the most important piece was the top piece, and of course that was the piece that I didn't have. So here's the model number, just in case you guys see this. You can tell that this is a very new installation, 0523. This was literally built for this job and sent out just a month prior. Okay. So the first thing that we did is I lined this up. My measurements were close enough to where I lined the spindle hole up with the center line of the cylindrical lever prep of the door. You can line yours up however your specific needs are. Okay. These, let's see here. So I thought it would be easiest to already use the existing hole. I don't want to drill any extra holes if we don't have to. So I'm going to base mine off of here. It was all within the parameters that we set up, and it ended up working out really well. So here's my other tech right here. Here's Aaron. He's holding everything up, and we're just kind of doing a mock-up and just see how it looks. Make sure that the bolt is actually going to be free and be able to latch into the frame of the door, into the box that we're going to mount on there, and make sure everything is free of obstruction and not going to interfere with anything. Okay. Once we do that, then we can actually start bolting things on. I always like to dry mock it up first. You could even use like a self-tapping screw or something to just kind of see if things are going to look right. My projects have to pass the eye test and look like they're going to work. I'm a very visual person, so I have to lay all of my parts out. I have to hold something up and bolt it up and say, okay, this looks like it's going to work. Let's move on to the next step. Because being in this trade and industry, I have found more manufacturer discrepancies than I would like to admit. Sometimes I end up having to be my own technical support out in the field because technical support was not very supportive, unfortunately. And this was one of those cases. So here I am. I'm going to set all my parts out. I'm going to empty into each individual baggies into individual parts and piles right here. Have everything all laid out. Anytime I take something apart, I set it out in line just like I took it apart so that it can be reassembled and that there are no leftover parts at the end. Got my drill bits, tools, all the stuff that I'm going to need all right in here on this shelving. Okay. And again, here it is set up, mocked up, and this is what it's looking like from the inside. So we've got this mortise body lock inside of this larger body, and this will all start to make a little bit more sense as we go through. Okay, so here are all of the support pieces. Now these get through bolted through the door all the way to the other side, and this piece actually sticks out the other side. This literally, it's a cool system. It literally turns your standard hollow metal door into as close of a vault door as possible. I could not imagine trying to brute force entry past this system. It would be very obnoxious to try and do that. It would take a tremendous amount of force to try and brute force entry past this, which is the whole point, right? That's the entire design of it, is to make sure that it keeps people out. That's why they paid the money for it, and that's why they opted for this. Now, here's a key piece of information. Learning how to do this is going to work into your favor, because do you know who demanded all of these doors? 5 doors in total have these high security multi-point locking systems. The insurance company. You know who the customer can't argue with when it comes to coverage and what they need to have spec'd for their location? The insurance company. Insurance company sets the bar, and if they do not pay, or they do not listen, or they do not comply with what the insurance company requires, they don't get paid if they get robbed. Okay, so the insurance company is the one who implements all of this. So you can charge whatever you want to install these. Now, it ended up being 3 days to get all of these done. And there was some additional work. We had to do door closers. One of the other units had a misaligned or the wrong length of vertical rod on an interior concealed door. There was a million problems with this system. But because we had the technical expertise to be able to dive in and fix every one of those problems systematically, I got to charge a premium rate. I got to make about $7,000, a little over, for 3 days worth of work installing the system and making sure that all the other ones worked. That's a pretty good chunk of change for just about anybody. So go for that high-end cream of the crop work. And make sure you know how these systems work before you attempt it, because had I not had any clue about this, it would have been a nightmare. All right, so here's some more of our instructions, just making sure that we have the correct instructions laid out for the correct installation. Again, this was kind of a bizarre one because it was an in-swing door, and this is what's called a surface housing locking case. Okay, so that's the actual technical term. Step number 1 is to prep the door. Step number 2 is to install the surface housing locking case. Okay, that's what that big mortise body thing is here. So we line this up. We bolt it on, comes with some self-tapping screws. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 of them probably. Okay, and then it's also going to, this one here actually comes back out, and this one here comes back out. And when you bolt on the exterior portion of it, or the trim, it actually has a separate portion that bolts through here. So it is still a bolt-on contact point. It just isn't that particular one. Marcus said insurance companies can be the biggest lead generators for security specialists, even better than real estate agents. I 1000% agree with that. Insurance rules the day. If insurance requires it, it must be done. It is not an ask. It is not a permission. It is a requirement. And for them to spend, I would say, to get all of these doors in, to pay my bill, to pay the contractor, and to pay everybody else, they probably paid $30,000 or so to have all this stuff done. But when you have products that cost $50,000 for one small item, all of a sudden that's a drop in the bucket. It's not that big deal. When you have one item that you could sell that is $1.2 million, all of a sudden 30 grand is pennies on the dollar. So it does pay out in the end. You just have to make sure you're in with the correct construction company, the correct insurance companies, and the correct client list as well. Here's what it looks like from the outside. This is one of the holes that's going to be drilled through for the trim that comes on the outside here. Did not have to drill that center hole because we were able to utilize it. And here we are prepping that center piece, just like so. This is going to be a drill bit that goes through, and that's going to allow the trim from the outside to come in. Okay, and then we'll do it on the bottom. So we got one hole on the top, one hole on the bottom. I can tell you that precision measuring is absolutely required on this. This is not one of those jobs that you can just be 1/8 of an inch off on. You have to be dead perfect on almost everything. Okay, here again, we're drilling that bottom hole out from the inside to allow the trim, and this is the trim piece. So the trim piece is going to come on, and then this little extension piece actually is what bolts everything together. And then the outer portion of the case, the lid on the case, or the backing on the case, actually screws into this. You'll also notice a wire. Not only is this an ultra uber high security locking system, very, very, very secure, very strong and robust, it's also electronic access controlled. Okay, so now that we've got wires, we've got an actuator that can actually scan a card. The wire goes through the door, and it goes back in through an electrified hinge, and it goes back to the main operating system until it tells it what to do. That's what powers it and makes it work. So not only do we have the security of a Trident style lock that has the multiple points of locking, we now pair that with electronic access, which is what everybody wants nowadays, and we make a highly effective system. Okay. Here we have it again. This is what it looks like here. And then there's that wire that runs out. And then we've got a little spindle and a spring that come in that'll come into play later. That's what the spindle looks like. So now we've taken that self-tapping screw out, and then I just used it to drill the hole, basically to pilot drill it and to hold everything in place. That comes out. This bolts on, the external trim bolts on. It's literally 2 bolts, very easy. Now, if you're ever trying to service this system and you can't find any screws or anything to release it, it's because it's all inside. You have to take the housing, you have to take the back plate off, and then you have to take this piece off in order to release the trim, to rekey anything or to work on anything from the internal point. Okay. All right, what do we got next here? So here's the external trim being put on. very slim, very narrow. It's not going to cover up our hole here, but this is not a fire door. And I was assured that the painters would take care of any holes that needed to be filled. Now we've got that top and bottom hole on, just like so, top and bottom. And that is now fixed and put into place. Now we've got to deal with the top linkage, okay? So here's where all of my problems and sorrows began. We need to have the upper portion with a in-swing mount. Here's what it looks like with the external trim, and then you've got an interchangeable core, obviously, because it would be a nightmare to have to rekey this thing to take it apart every time. So excellent opportunity for a high security interchangeable core locking system here. So now, since everything's going to be covered up and the vertical linkage rods are actually going to cover everything, they're going to be physically bolted on there. I just used a square and drew my straight line. This one, actually, it's a Milwaukee one. It actually has a pencil mark, so you can actually hold it, draw it up and down, and it comes into play. It holds that nice straight line, and then I don't have to measure every time to see if anything's veering off. So now we've got the main portion bolted down here. Now the next thing that's the most important is the top vertical linkage, because that's what fires and triggers everything. So here's the piece that ruined my day for 4 hours. This piece would not fit on there, no matter what we tried. Here's why. Because on an in-swing door, it has to come shut, and there has to be a gap in between the two so that it can actually fire the trigger mechanism on top. This does not allow that to happen. No matter which way you put it, no matter which way you set it, it will not allow that to happen. Although it looks extremely similar to the actual piece that goes on, and unless technical support says the words, "You do not have this piece, we need to ship this piece to you. When would you like us to ship this to you?" That was the bit of information, had I gotten 4 hours prior, would have been very effective. But we got to roll with it. We got to go with what we have. And I had to wait and put this project off till the next day, till they could overnight some parts in. Okay. So then here's another piece of the vertical linkage up here. And this is the actual piece that we needed. Okay. We're going to have to jump to another section because there's so many so many photos here. This is the actual piece that we needed. Notice it's actually going to bolt flush against the wall, and it's going to allow for this little trigger mechanism here to actually move. That was the problem. The other one was crushing it and holding it down, not letting it move. When it doesn't let it move, it can't fire. When it can't fire, it's not going to operate properly. It's going to be permanently in the unlocked or in the trying to lock position, and it'll never line up, because it's going to throw the bolts every time. Here's how it looks from this angle, and you can see that there's a gap that allows this little paddle to engage a piece at the top to make this system work. Here's what it looks like mounted on the door. Now I have my new piece. I'm going to start by measuring the holes here, and then you can see that this top piece is going to go flush up against the frame like so. Okay, little angle from the top. We're going to have to get rid of that alarm contact, and now we've got it bolted into place. This uses 2 forms of bolts. One bolt goes all the way, or two bolts go all the way through. These ones are literally through bolted all the way through the entire door. And then we have self-tapping screws here. Okay. It's not coming off of there easily. Here, I'm setting up and making sure that the vertical linkage aligns properly, because there's a notch cut out in the top of this door. So when the notch is cut out in the top of the door, we actually need to set it in place so that I can mock it up. Again, I'm mocking everything up, testing for alignment, testing that everything moves and nothing's in a bind before I screw and bolt everything down. These are the through bolts, and this is the through bolt plate that go on the outside. Okay, this is going to go on the outside of the door. That's all you're going to see from the outside, round heads and a flat plate. So it's designed to reinforce the door as well. Here, I'm making sure that I have my correct measurement, that everything's lining up. There's only one position that this can go in. So the box literally sets the alignment for the vertical linkage. If the vertical linkage isn't lined up correctly or the box isn't lined up correctly, you're going to have problems. And everything is based off of alignment. If you do not pay attention to detail, you are going to have a miserable time with this door and this locking system. Now I just double check, measure up top that we have the same distance, and we do. Now it's time to bolt everything down, drill our holes, and get everything locked down into place. We got rid of that alarm contact up at the top, and here we have it. We're sitting about 3.5 inches off of the edge of the door. Now, you notice that we had a plastic plate under there earlier. Now we've got this metal plate. So there's a lot of sandwiching of material. There's a lot of sandwiching of material with the install on these, and especially in the vertical support rods. Here it is again here. You can see the gap that allows that trigger device to move back and forth, and then the bolt fires up into the linkage that we're going to install up on the top of the frame. So we have sandwich, we've got the poly material and that top mounting bracket, and then we have the metal bracket underneath that. There's also one other bracket that needs to go in there as well. Okay, this is the outer shield or the outer cover plate, and this is the support that holds it. So you notice there's an angle on there. Right now it's kind of this L shape where it jogs in and then comes straight out. This is a filler plate for that. Excuse me. So we're going to break these off. We're going to take this chunk here, disregard that, throw it away. And now you have these two separate individual pieces. Here's a tip. Put a little dab of super glue on there. It will make your day easier. Put a little dab of super glue and put it on the door and just hold it for a couple seconds, and it will hold everything in place. Worst case scenario, wrong direction, wrong part. A tiny drop of super glue was what I said to use, because if you need to break it loose, it'll come loose. If it needs to stay, you can leave it just like that. It's going to help hold everything together, and you can slide the cover plate right on top of it. Okay, so this is what the cover plate is designed to do. It's designed to go over it just like so. So we've got our mounting blocks, even has an L and an R stamped directly into it, so you cannot get them backwards. Put them into place. The bolts do not hold these down. This goes over the bolts. That's why your little drop of super glue is going to help, because it's just sitting there. It's just floating. There's nothing bolting it or holding it in place. It's just a filler plate. Okay, so now this one is stamped R. We can put the R one on. And it's going to look something like so. Nothing is holding these in place. Literally, it's just resting on the bolts. So little dab of super glue on that backside, little dab of super glue on that backside. You can pull it apart if you need to. It's not permanently mounted, but it's going to hold it while you do the rest of the things that you need to do. All right. Here's a picture of the full vertical linkage. Everything looks straight. See, this is part of my visual aspect. If I see this thing veering off one way or the other, I'm going to make sure to come back and measure it again. Now, this is a very important plate. This plate is actually going to make sure that the cover plate slides into place. Okay, so I'm going to show you how that works. This thickness right here, this plate mounted on this other plate, is the exact thickness of the cover plate that goes over everything. So I actually forgot to install this, or not forgot to, but I did not install it at first, and then had to come back and pull that internal plate off. This plate goes on first, then that U-shaped plate goes on, then everything slides in on top of that. Yet again, super glue is going to be your friend on these, because nothing likes to stay in place and nothing likes to stay where you put it. And there's nothing that bolts this onto place. So a little dab of super glue on this plate as well will also help it stay and not shake, rattle, and roll. That's what this plate is for. It's actually the exact same thickness as this plate, so that it can slide into the space right here between that metal block and between this, okay? That is exactly what this is for. Here, we'll show you on this one. This is going to be the first support beam. Now, I like to get rid of seams. I do not want to see them. So the first thing I'm going to do is try and mount this right where that seam is. So it's going to cover it up and it's going to look flawless. All right. So now we've got our holes marked out, our plate centered on this joint, if you will. That's going to be a weak point anyways. So we'll add that extra support here. Then we stack up the plates till we get the correct thickness. It might be 2 thick plates. It might be a thick plate and a thin plate. And then also this very specific plate that will have to go on every single one of them to allow the cover plate to slip into place. This plate is always the last one, and it always goes with this plate facing out so that you can slide on top of it. So that other cover plate is going to slide and use the gap created here and here to be able to make this system work. These are literally just spacers to space from the door to the vertical linkage so it can't move, okay? Just like this. Then we've got that U-shaped bracket that goes over everything and locks it in place. I mark out my holes, I drill my holes. I don't think it was quite 3/8, a little bit smaller. Let's see. I can't remember exactly what size we used there. 5/16 maybe. And then here's what one of the plates looks like up at the top. This is what you see from the outside. Nothing but a round carriage bolt and a reinforced piece of steel with stamping into it to make it look extra tough. So it says, don't mess with me, find an easier path. That's what this says to me. All right, that will be it for our group of pictures here. We'll come down. And you can see how the plate mounts like so. And when we put those plastic pieces on, it's going to space that out so that we can put the cover plate directly on. I get my through bolts mounted first, and then the self-tappers are going to be pretty easy. We'll just run them in after we get this secured. Here's what the bottom plate looks like. Okay, that's just where it so happened to be where that joint was. I wanted to protect the joint, so that's where I mounted it. We were able to use a thick plate and a thin plate, and then the spacer plate as well. So 3 plates altogether to get the correct spacing on this. And then we had plenty of room with the through bolts to actually get everything to suck up and sink down. Here's what it looks like all put together with the top in place and the middle one only missing the air gap plastic pieces and the cover plate that covers everything up and seals everything together. And again, we've got our through bolts, lock washers, and self-tapping screws as well. It utilizes both directly from the manufacturer. Now you can begin to see how if you crush these bolts down too tight, you're going to lose your gap. So there is a little finesse here. This is one of those things where you won't even understand how this works until you're installing one or you watch an installation video like this one. So we've got just that tiny little gap, so that plate will literally slide up over and the overlap will go in between here, making it so that you cannot pull it off. However, it does pop up and slide up and off very easily. So we stop that by, again, putting our little dab of super glue on the blocks and putting our little dab of super glue on the plate itself. Here are our 2 little blocks. Notice that I don't have to touch them. I don't have to hold them. I just put the little dab of super glue on there, push it, hold it for 10 seconds. Then it's done. It stays and it won't move unless you bump it real hard. And here's our gap from the side. Plainly, blatantly see a gap. If you don't have a gap at the top and you have a big gap at the bottom, you've got a problem. You need to make sure that you have everything in place and that it's evenly spaced and that this line is evenly spaced all the way down. Otherwise, your plate will not fit on. It'll either be too tight or too loose. Here's what it looks like from a little bit different angle. You can see for this one, we had to stack a thick one, 2 thin ones, and an additional spacing plate. What it looks like from the side, on the left side. And now that cover plate just slides right over, slides right into these grooves, and seals and cleans everything up. Now, once it's on there, these 2 black pieces cannot fall out, but waiting to get to this point, I did find it frustrating dealing with it. That's why little dab of super glue, now it stays in place and I don't have to worry about it. If I do need to get it off, a screwdriver, pliers, it'll come right off and I can start over. So you can see it sliding down into that little gap and it will stay put. Little aerial view from the top and a little closer from the sides. Okay. Gap, portion that's sliding into the gap. Here's what our second vertical linkage mounting bracket and support bracket looks like, installed and done. Here again, very prime example of that gap and what that plate does and how it holds the space for it. Okay, it holds the space here so that you can set this on and it gives it a groove to slide into. So now if I came up to it, I couldn't just pull this piece off. I have to lift it up and then pull it off, which is going to defy gravity. And then we just do it again for the third. Excuse me, support. And now I'm starting to get into a rhythm. Now I know what the process is and how I'm going to attack that process every single time. Does the plate clear the exterior doorstop? Are you able to test functionally as you progress through the installation? Kinda. That was one of the most frustrating things that I've found was it is very difficult to test the system. You almost need it 75% installed before you can start testing it, which means that you probably have an error somewhere and you're going to have to jump back 5 or 6 steps to correct that problem to move forward. Whereas normally if I have it my way, like when I'm assembling a deadbolt or any other locking mechanism, every time I tighten a screw, I try it and make sure that it works. Every time I loosen or change something, I try to make sure that it works. Try it from the inside, try it from the outside, try it with a key. If it works, good. I do something else. I change something else. Okay. Test it again and again and again. So excellent point, Mark. Lots of testing. You can't really test it till you get about 75% installed. Here we have our middle plate, external plate bolted in place, and the top again. So now I believe we're going to start looking at what we need for alignment for that top piece. Obviously, this locking isn't going to do anything because it doesn't lock into anything. If it doesn't lock into anything, it's not going to hold anything, and there's nothing to actuate the trigger device. Here we see aerial view. And here is the top piece. Now we have to space this out correctly so that the bolt shoots into it and it has to actually hit the engagement piece here. Okay, so it has to hit this trigger device so that as the door comes shut, the bolts are retracted, retracted, retracted. It comes in contact with that and boom, like a mousetrap, click. When it's now lined up, it had to be lined up to be able to reach this. It fires everything off. And the door works great. Here's what it looks like on the inside here. I actually have that plate backwards. So that plate should have come out here and we correct that a little bit later. But the point is that this picture shows the engagement of the top catch and its engagement with the tongue that throws the bolts. And then we also have to make sure that when we install this from the very beginning back to mounting the cassette, the reason I set things up dry is I want to know, do I have enough room that this is actually going to catch? If I got to put a catch box up here and this thing is 1.5 inches shorter, how's that going to work? It's not going to work. Okay. They also give you these spacing tabs to help get your alignment correct, so you can use these as you see fit and as you need them. They're more specific towards the top and bottom ones because they take different plates that mount in behind them. Here you can see, creating room. We're going to make that little space right here. Insert that in, put the bolts through it, and now you're good to go. Got this mounted with self-tapping screws all the way through. Got that mesh that runs right into the high security door. And voila, all put together, at least the top portion of it, it's going to look something like this. Notice that piece is right here, getting ready to engage. As soon as it comes close enough, it engages, click, and fires the bolt off inside the housing here. It also fires the bolt into the frame this way and fires a down facing vertical linkage as well. 3 points of locking. Here's what it looks like from the other side. You can see how it engages, the paddle engages, that trigger device engages. Just like that. Here, we've got that mounted in place. And then we move down the line. Now this is setting up the bottom one. So we're already starting to drill the holes and get everything going through here. We'll set up those blocks. We've got that spacing plate in place and everything's looking real good. External plate on the bottom mounted. A through bolt that goes all the way through. And that spacing plate right on the joint. And to move the alarm contact in order to get this to work. So this is the locking system and the through bolts. Through bolts are here with lock washers, and then we have self-tapping screws on there as well. So you're not just going to be able to hit this thing and blow the self-tapping screws out. You actually have long bolts that go all the way through everything. It's kind of a cool system. Here we have that gap again. Make sure you save that. It can be a headache if you do not. I did it twice where I just wrenched everything down, lost my gap, and then had to back everything off because my plate would not fit, cover plate would not fit. Dab of super glue, on they go. Making sure that we have our proper spacing so that we can put the cover plate on. Better to catch that now than later. Bolts in place, plastic filler pieces in place, space in place, cap slides on, slides right down into the gap, and you're done. Now you can't, one thing I wish you could do is slide it into place and then tighten these bolts down, but I guess that would kind of defeat the purpose. Even though it's on the inside, I couldn't tell you. I think this is supposed to be on the outside, and that would be the problem if it was on the outside and people undid the bolts, so you could take the system apart. And again, just another little side shot of how that's supposed to slide down in there. Holding the gap, slide it down in. And this is what it's going to look like when you're done. Sandwiched, fits right in, blocks are good, holes are filled, everybody's happy. Bottom portion, wash, rinse, and repeat the system. It will work again. Just make sure you get your measurements correct. Bottom external cover plate. I mean, you can tell when you walk up to this door screams, go find something easier, because this one's going to ruin your day big time. Just making sure that everything's connecting properly and that we use the proper amount of spacing plates so that it engages with the trigger device. Okay, lining everything up, making sure that it touches. It should, even when bolted down. And we should be good to go. There it is, just like that, top vertical linkage mounted. You can put these little spacers in there if you need to. I did not need them for my project, but you might need them for yours. Then we bolt on the upper catch so that the bolt has something to slide into. Now they do make frame through bolts that go through here, and I'll show you that with the catch on the bottom. I didn't think it was necessary here, and the drywall gets in the way of the whole project on the inside. So this is barely. As soon as it goes just another little bit, it's actually going to reduce the friction. The spring will kick into play, and it will release and eject the bolt into the lock. Here's what that mounting piece looks like by itself. I hope we didn't run into the same one again, did we? Oops. Okay, so now we've got our top upper bracket mounted in the frame, got the body mounted, and now we pull the vertical linkage out and begin to attach it to the mortise body. It's a very simple system. It's just got a ladder cutout, and you put a pin in here, and that's it. You're set. Here's what it looks like a little bit bigger. And the entire package so far. 3.5 inches out. That's all good. This is the goofy little clip that they give you to clip everything together. So this literally just clips right on here, and that's what actuates the whole thing. Very simple design. You can see the pin clipping right here. It's got both top and bottom, clipping everybody in place, and then kicks off over to the side. You can adjust it if you need to, but it's going to keep it more in line than otherwise. A little bit close up of the paperclip looking pin, retaining pin that's going to actually keep this linkage in place. And again, pin that keeps the linkage in place. Now that we have the top and the bottom both set up, if you need to raise it up, go up the ladder bar. If you need to come down the ladder bar. If it does not fit, okay, that was the other thing. Had I mounted this in a different location where technical support actually wanted, it probably wouldn't have worked out very well because it was too low. My top bar was not going to reach the ceiling or the top mount, and the bottom one would have been into the floor. Okay, major problems. Here is the extension box that is going to get mounted on the frame side to catch the main bolt from the mortise body. In order to install this, I first just used self-tapping screws to hold it in place so that I could take my measurements and mark out where it needs to go and do a dry run. When I do a dry run, it allows me to see if everything's working or if I need to adjust my hole positioning. Luckily, we got this right on the first try. Now you can see how this bolts on and how that locking bolt goes directly into it. Okay, very heavy duty, very powerful setup. It gives us measurements on the frame side on how to mount this. So the first thing that we'll do is put our trusty old tape measure up there, mark out our alignment, and go ahead and prep the frame. Here we have the drill going through the frame. And yes, you will have to drill through the whole frame. Look at how long that screw is, or that bolt. This carriage bolt is like 18 inches long or 15 inches long or something. It's crazy. It's like this big, okay? So that goes through here and literally through bolts it onto the door. And people are asking, well, what if we just drilled these screws out, right? Nope, that's still not going to help because you're going to have a lot of other vertical linkage to deal with. Yeah, both of them do make a nice system. I definitely found myself more frustrated with this setup, more of the interaction that we had with the technical support rather than the actual design of the system itself. But you can see you'll need an 18-inch drill bit to drill all the way through. It's going to make your life a whole lot easier rather than trying to measure down and connect the holes together. Okay. I did it both ways. Trust me, this way is easier. All right, so then I come back here, and this is actually going to almost act as a guide because it's not going to allow very much deflection. Come in, drill all the way through, and you're good to go. 4 screws, 4 bolts is what it's going to take to bolt that thing into place. And you can see this bolt coming through right here. I actually had to kind of bend that one out of the way or cut it out of the way to make the next hole. Bolted in, all nice and fancy. Apparently they were cut out for machine taper screws. I didn't get those in the kit. I was pretty fed up with technical support at that time, so this is how we bolted it on there. We just put the carriage bolts on the outside. We could not put this side on the outside. We cut them off flush, filed everything down, no sharp edges. This was the only way that I could do it with the parts that we had. Round caps on the outside. You are not getting that thing off. How long would you sit here with a drill to drill all of these off? And it still wouldn't let you in because you'd have to drill all the other bolts off as well that are on the door. It's still using the vertical linkage to hold the door shut. So even if you drilled all those off, it still wouldn't help you. Okay, so I stopped taking pictures, but then you're going to do the same thing on the bottom. You got support, and then you got a support and a support here for the bottom. This is how everything interlocks and how the linkage actually interacts with the mortise case. And this is what it looks like all bolted together from the inside, okay? This is what this panel looks like when it's bolted back on. Very intimidating, very, very heavy duty. And that's what that system's going to like, pretty much installed. I think I left one screw out here. Still have to put that on. Of course, we put that on before it was all said and done. But definitely a heavy system. Now for the bottom, you've got a round pin that shoots out. It's not a square block like the top. The reason for this is because we're going to have to get a cup and drill that into the concrete floor to allow this to enter into it. Okay. So self-tapping screws, through bolts go next. I think that was the system that I found worked pretty well, is if I got that on there, put the self-tapping screws on, then these are already lined up, use my size drill bit to come in on the bottom, drill it all the way through, you're done. A lot easier than marking and taking everything back off. So here we go. Got everything lined up, just like that. Good pictures documenting everything. Now we need a hole in the floor. So my technique for this is I would close the door, I would let the bolts fire, and they would not fire fully because obviously this one can't fire all the way, but it will once we get done with this. So I would then take, what I would take is a L-shaped O-ring puller, and I would run it under the door, and I would scratch around the bolt so that I could see what I had, and then marked it up in with black Sharpie. This is all concrete, so we need a diamond hole saw or a carbide hole saw. I would highly recommend diamond over carbide. Diamond's going to go a lot easier. Drill your cup that comes with the kit down in, and then there's a spring-loaded cup that accepts that bottom pin, and then you're set, you're good to go. Okay. And then here we have it. After we get the last few pieces installed, all of the bolts are installed, all of the bolts are installed, everything is installed, and everything is working the way that it should now. This is final product right here. And then here's what that cup looks like being mounted into the ground as well. Okay, so we drill it out. It's a larger size than the pin, obviously. And then that pin drives right down into this bottom linkage, and that is stuck right in the concrete. I think last week I did how to install these. There was about a half-hour seminar on how to install these and how I was doing it. I use a wet process where we use water, diamond hole saw, Diablo diamond hole saw, to be specific, worked very, very well. They're actually extra deep, so they did an amazing job on this project. We also drill it out larger than the cup, and then I use epoxy to and steel stick. You do not want to use a liquid epoxy, because what will happen is it'll actually seep into this. I don't even know what they call it. It's just an in-floor pin receiving cup, I guess. I couldn't come up with the technical name for it at that time. But it will fill up. There's holes in it. It can fill up with epoxy, and then you're really hosed. So the JB Weld's putty epoxy on the outside, mix it up. You got about 3 minutes to play with it. Roll it up, coat that thing in it, fill up the bottom, shove it into the hole, cut off the excess, and voila, this thing is now mounted and ready to go. Here's what it looks like, complete project from the outside as well. We've got our plates, big plates, external trim plates, and plates all the way through the system. Here is how it's going to be electrified. We were asked not to touch the electronics. So how did we bolt this on here with the wire hanging here? Well, we fed all the wire back into the door and then zip tied it to the actual mounting holes so that it didn't get lost, so we didn't have to fish it back out. Had we just kicked this wire off to the side and tried to close the door, you'd have pinched the wire, and I would have had some very, very angry IT people at me and some low voltage people. So let's take a look and see here at the finished product in video mode. All right, so now that we have the upper bracket installed here, we're going to go ahead and test and see that it works. Now, to test and make sure that it works, you can see that everything is fully retracted currently, and we have to see how this works. Okay, you touch that, comes in. Okay, touch that. It's friction based. So there's a spring that holds that piece in place, and it rides against the vertical linkage. And as soon as it's released, it's under spring tension to fire off. You cannot test the top vertical linkage alignment with the bottom vertical linkage installed unless you have the cup in place already. So I was doing this process of elimination style. So I believe we did not have the bottom vertical linkage installed yet. Comes in. So now I'm going to touch, and voila. Now it's clicked into there real good. Okay. So it's going to click, it's going to activate, and then it does hold. Okay. So now we can base all of our other measurements off of that. All right. So now that we have the upper bracket installed here. Then we've got one final video for complete installation, and that is it. We'll get questions, comments, concerns. All righty, so we've installed the Securitech multi-point locking system that utilizes the lever that collapses these vertical. Mark Dawson is saying that piece is called a flush strike. So the piece in the floor that goes in the floor is called a flush strike. Rods, this is a weird install because it's an in-swing door. Normally it'd kind of be an outswing door. Also, they do offer this so that it has internal components inside the door, but this is a conversion kit. So we have the main mortise body here. We've got the upper portion here, and everything pivots off of the top trigger device right here. So if I can pull this door open and touch this, the bolts fly out, up, out, and down. I then retract the lever, and the piece up here is a friction piece that holds everything in. So everything is controlled by this top piece. Now we take it, cut the door. We still have, the contractor still has to do some framework on the door. They've got to push that frame over just a little bit. But now we're locked into here. We're locked into here. This has through bolts that go all the way through the frame. And then we've got a hinge pin that locks down into the bottom, into the floor as well. So 3 points of contact basically turn this thing into a gigantic vault door. And I'll pull that open, okay? Pull it down. Everything works just fine. And again, I'll show you the trigger point, just like so. Slide down here, here, and down into the bottom until you turn the handle and it retracts everything in. That is the Securitech 3-point locking system. Really cool, very high security, very nice for high security applications. All righty. With that, do we have questions, comments, or concerns? Go ahead and feel free to unmute your microphones.
Hey, Wayne.
What's up, Mark?
What was the actual recommendation by the insurance company? Did they need a high security application or a 3-point locking application? What did they ask for?
This was the most bizarre install I have ever done. I did not get the specs. The contractor got the specs. From what I understand, this company has a cookie cutter design so that they set up every store the same way. So when they move into a location, they have the same points of entry and they have the same style doors on all of those points of entry. This one was a downstairs office that was not attached to the rest of the building or to the rest of the store. So all of the other ones were internal built because, gosh forbid, they could not have anything ugly like that be seen by the public. All the other doors were all internal, same system, same tri-point system, just all built into the door. So I don't know what their requirements were. I know when I left, we installed all that high security stuff on a general Falcon interchangeable core key. Pretty easy to pick. They probably an A or an L keyway.
Well, yeah, I think you know as well as anybody with the door division that you operate that you could have ordered a door spec'd or templated for a tornadic resistant mortise lock and still had awesome 3-point locking mechanism that was very secure.
Correct. It was what I was told from the contractor is they have their own people in-house, internal, and their low voltage guys are the ones that come in and wire everything up, and their people are the ones that work direct with Securitech, and Securitech is the one that specs the hardware for the doors and the doors themselves.
Well, so I have to hand it to Securitech. They had some impressive marketing brochures come out after the 2020 riots when all the riots were going on. They had locations where they burned the door, beat the doors, and they did everything they could to the door, and they couldn't get into the back of those shops. And there's many locations like dispensaries that are requiring this level of security, and that I understand. But, you know, jewelry stores, dispensaries, pawn shops, this is a given to give this kind of security to.
Yep. Yeah. I know being one of the first states to actually go recreational marijuana use and legalize for recreational use. We were one of the first for medical too.
Yeah, how's that working out for you guys?
Amazing. Tons of tax money for the schools. I can tell you that before recreational use was approved, they couldn't find people to work in the schools. They were always short-staffed. They didn't have any money. The buildings were ran down, and it was a very dire situation. Contingent on recreational use being approved was the first schools. The very first 6 months They hit that number and they had to have an emergency meeting to decide what to do with all of the extra money. So the very next year, my kids had iPads and tablets in every single class. So that is what it has done for the state. The schools got all the money they could use to the point where they had to have emergency meetings to figure out what to do with all of the extra money involved.
And that's an exact pro that we want to see. What are some of the cons?
I mean, it depends on what your take is. If it's recreational and you're walking through a public event with your kids, you will get a whiff from time to time with all the vape pens and everything else out there, or just raw product being smoked and used. DUIs have gone down, violent crime has gone down. Really, the pros strongly run away from the cons. Of course, you're going to have those people who are just very set in their ways and stuck. Usually people in law enforcement mostly are highly resistant to the idea and the concept. I have people now that even 4 or 5 years later still call them the drugstores, but I see very, very little downside, and I see a lot of revenue upside. It's given 1 million people jobs. People that are currently collecting a government welfare check can easily go be bud tenders and go be around what they want to be around all day long and get paid to do it. One of the biggest problems actually, to what you were probably alluding to when we first started, is that there wasn't any federal backing behind it. So it was an all cash business. No federal backing means that they can't have a bank account. Not having a bank account means that they can't be federally insured, means that they can't accept credit card payments. So what happened? What happens when you have a lot of cash? You get robbed. So we had a lot of armed robbery happen at the beginning. Turns out 2 years later, the industry had so much money, they created their own infrastructure and their own banking system. That's how much money it generated. They created their own financial system. Also, if your state does legalize recreationally, find those bank vaults, those buildings with bank vaults in them. They're useless now because nobody uses safe deposit boxes anymore. Everybody's got a home safe. Nobody goes to the bank to cash a check anymore. It's all online. Banks are on their way out. Bank vaults are on their way out. And then you have a big space that nobody knows what to do with a big bank vault that needs to be demoed for safety reasons. People, the marijuana industry will love that, and they will want that, and they will want to buy those buildings and set their stores up there, or they'll want to buy the vault doors and have them move to their location to utilize them.
Yeah, those locations in Texas are being demoed, and that was the problem from the pandemic. When you couldn't have access to your safe deposit box for 3 to 4 weeks, you had to make an appointment only in a very small window of time to get into the bank and have all these safety precautions. It created a big problem. And during the pandemic, I sold my showroom out of safes 4 times.
Yep.
Completely out. I mean, that floor had never been vacuumed so well. So
good problems to have. Yes. And
without naming the customer, what type of business was this that you were installing for?
Similar to, like I said, a Louis Vuitton, Dolce & Gabbana, really, really high-end retail, high-end clothes, purses, etc.
Yeah, I'm doing an access control system for a high-end watch store in a couple of weeks. And it's really just pedestrian traffic control, where they can have the front door locked all the time and allow access by the press of the button.
I bet I know who's moving in. Call me afterwards. Yeah.
Well, no, this is one that's local to Houston, but the Omega line and those types of lines of watches. I mean, when you've got cases full of $20,000 watches, you can't just have anybody walking in. But I'm in kind of an exclusive market anyway, and that area is it's your high-end shoppers that are there. Yeah. And when the thugs walk in, so to speak, whether they're white, black, Hispanic, or whatever color, people notice and they get full attention, and they get a back ride, so to speak. People are on them, they're watching them, all that stuff. So yeah, the market I'm in is fantastic, and I can even reach out to many clients My problem is I've got so much work I can hardly handle it,
I
let
know.
alone go out and sell this kind of stuff, which I would love to install. I would love, this is therapeutic to me to see this kind of install. They spend 8 hours on it, just quote the project labor, take my time. I'm in it for 8 hours,
Yep.
get it done.
Yep. And we made money doing it. Yes, that project kicked my butt for a little while. And yes, we had problems. And yes, I had a 4 hour delay, but I was smart enough to know that it was going to be a complicated installation anytime. Think about how hard it is to get a single door to align properly with 1 or 2 points of contact. Now
Yep.
times that by 3, and they all have to work in sync together. So when I quoted it out, I said, look, I think it'll take me 3 days to do this. I don't know, but this is what my guess is. And we ended up coming right in, right where we said we were going to do. There was a ton of other work. Like I said, I literally had to build parts for the internal linkage for one of the other doors because they sent the wrong one. They overnighted another part and it was the wrong one. It was too short and the one that was in there was already too short. So they sent me an even shorter one to fix the problem, right? No, I had to go to the store and buy some all thread and build a whole new one that was longer. But the point is bidding it correctly with plenty of cushion in mind, knowing that you're going to run into problems, left me at the end of the day walking away with my pockets full, not empty, and still having that experience with it. Now, when Securitech has another project to install, who do you think they're going to ask to come be on that project?
Yeah.
I get more projects from the manufacturers that know that we know how to actually install their product to their specifications because of that fact. You
Absolutely.
can't hire a handyman. So.
I think one of the things you touched on near the beginning of this video was dry fitting components. There's what we call a point of no return in any job where you have gotten to a point where you can't go back and put on the old product to secure the door even overnight.
Nope.
And you've got to keep dry fitting stuff to make sure that, hey, can I progress forward far enough to get this door secure for tonight?
Yes.
That's always a question in the back of my mind when I'm working with some complex system. And knowing what's on your truck in the back of your mind is also a great thing. No matter what problem you run into, you get to think that through and what's on my truck that can help me overcome this.
Yep, exactly. Those are all really good points. And that's really what kept going in my head. Have we reached the point of no return? And that is something that I actually asked the customer. Luckily, we're doing this with the contractor. So we're in contractor mode, and that just happened to be the contractor's office. So I asked him, I said, I don't know if we're going to get this on here, and I need this one part that controls everything, and we don't have it, and they didn't tell me that, and that's why we're in the position we're in right now. Do you need to lock this up tonight? I was able to still, even not having that part, I just took all the vertical linkage back off and just mounted that box on there. So everything was locking with just the mortise body. So I was still able to provide security for that evening. But that's a great point. You do need to know what your limits are. And if you make a mistake, you better know how to fix it. Everybody makes mistakes. It's knowing how to fix it and make sure that it's not noticeable when you're done that really counts. So excellent. Yeah, you're going to see more of these cell phone stores. I mean, I think the cell phone stores, with the exception of Apple has their own Apple Store thing kind of built in. As far as I can tell, Verizon doesn't care anymore. They don't want locations. They don't want any customer interaction. They just want to deal direct to end user. They want to send the phones out right from the manufacturer. You can't even get the good high data phones like the 1 terabyte or the 500 storage phones from the stores anymore. They don't even send them to them. The stores tell you to order them. But with more and more of these high-end places moving in, and dispensaries, cash locations, high-end jewelry stores, these are going to be mandatory by the insurance company, and there is no avoiding it. If your state goes legal, TL30 safes are going to fly off the shelves too.
I foresee that the cell phone stores will not be lasting much longer. If we can sell cars through a vending machine,
yep.
It won't be long till cell phone stores are only ordering online and all support is online. You don't deal with an individual anymore. All accessories are online, everything.
Yep. And then as soon as they get the drone shipping figured out, you'll be able to poke a button and one will be on its way. You'll be able to track it like your Domino's pizza from Denver right to your butt on the couch. So yeah, there's always, like I said, the banking industry kind of moved out. There's a whole nother industry that wanted to use those things. Being the person that can tie those two people together is the one that makes the money. I was told by a friend who was one of my very loyal customers at the very beginning of this, and he told me when the gold rush started in California, you could chance making your fortune finding gold, but it's a lot of hard work. You could either be the miner or you could be the person that sells the person the shovel. If you sell the shovel, you make money every single day. I'll sell the shovel. I won't use it. You're either going to sell the shovel or you're going to run the shovel. One of the two. So I'll sell the shovel. Any other questions, comments, concerns? If you do have any high-end clients looking at SecureTech doors that are all built with the frame and everything, man, those are slick setup too. They're really cool and really they look nice. So that's always a good option. All righty. If we do not have any questions, I've got a 2 in the chat here, plus AI here, under the lever or under the door tool from Kedex. Could be a good option. Yes, it would, but we're going to put, I'm pretty sure they have another threshold piece at the bottom. What I can't even, door sweep. They got a security door sweep that goes on there too. So under the door tool would probably not be an option with that after we're done. So awesome, cool. Well, that was a fun project that I had last right before we went on vacation, and happy to share it with everybody. So until next time, every Monday, 4 p.m. Mountain Standard Time, we are here and we're going to learn something. We're going to see something new. I'm going to bring you one of the cool projects that we did from the week before. So we'll see you next week. Have a great day and enjoy your evening.